Hello everyone, my name is BlueRibbon666, and yeah, this video is counting for 2 days since my broken voice task couldn't read a creepypasta to save my life. Today, I'm throwing things back to my high school years, good God, and talking about the most popular creepypasta characters that continue to be loved and feared all across the internet. Before I begin, I just wanted to let you guys know that I will be giving my own subjective opinion about these characters, so if you personally love a certain character that I don't, try not to take it personally. Some of these characters have been around for at least 5 to 8 years, and I've had plenty of time to look into them and explore these characters enough to form a basic opinion about them. Let's start with the OG creepypasta himself, the Slenderman. Nowadays, Slenderman is an extremely watered-down character. He used to be this looming ominous presence that made people lose sleep at night. But between the ships and the cutesy fan art and the god-awful movie they made about him, he's just not as scary as he was way back when. Marble Hornets, their take on Slenderman should have been the movie we got. Now, this isn't to say that the concept of Slenderman himself is bad. I've played Slender the 8 Pages, and quite frankly, if I were to be thrown into a situation like that IRL, someone bring me a change of pants and boxers because more than likely I shat myself copiously and desperately need it. I think there is some hope for Slenderman, but we all need to take off our rose-tinted glasses and build Slenderman to be the terrifying, looming presence that he originally was. Jeff the Killer. Honestly, there's not a lot of nice things I could say about Jeff the Killer. When I first listened to Mr. Creepypasta's narration of his backstory, back in the day, I thought, meh. It was okay, but the more I looked into it, and the older I get, the less his character feels intimidating and more like a self-insert in a horror movie fanfiction. In the original origin story, Jeff is 13, and his abilities seem to only be explained via going insane. That still doesn't intimidate me. If anything, it feels lazy. In real life, Jeff would just be another young teen that I could probably drop-kick across my apartment complex's parking lot, and yet somehow Jeff managed to win the hearts of emos all across the internet. I believe there was a rewrite of Jeff's backstory to where Jeff is 17, but I feel like that was done only after Hoodoo Hoodlum's Revenge roasted the shit out of the original story. Seriously, listen to his breakdown of Jeff the Killer in his list of overrated creepypastas. He makes a lot of good points that'll make you see why Jeff isn't the greatest creepypasta character out there. Which brings me to Jane the Killer and Homicidal Lou. Jane the Killer is just a female, more vengeful version of Jeff. Honestly, I feel like she was just created to give fans a similar character they could ship Jeff with. Homicidal Lou, from what I remember, was a better creepypasta story with a slightly more realistic dynamic. I know that I enjoyed his origin story a lot more than Jeff's. Laughing Jack. Laughing Jack is probably one of my favorite creepypasta characters. His origin story was done beautifully, and if you haven't given that a read or a listen yet, yes, it's long, but it's very good. Despite Hoodoo Hoodlum's review of the first story that Laughing Jack originated from, I still think it's okay. Sure, you might not get any context about who Jack really is, or why he does what he does, but it doesn't take away anything from that story. Another personal favorite character of mine is Tiki Toby. Yes, he was basically a kid that had a lot of unfortunate things happen to him, like Jeff the Killer, but it was handled with much more realistic approach. He suffers from Tourette syndrome, hence the tics, and he also has a condition that doesn't allow him to feel any pain. Both are real conditions, and if the perfect storm were to occur, it could produce a person kind of like Tiki Toby. Is it unlikely? Sure, but not entirely impossible. So to me, Tiki Toby is definitely one of the more realistic creepypasta characters out there. But him becoming a proxy for Slenderman, I feel, is the only place where the realism ends. 3 characters that are just kind of to me are Eyeless Jack, Masky, and Hoodie. Eyeless Jack gets more of a pass because he's definitely an intimidating character. I've heard his backstory, so he's definitely evolved since the first story about him came out. But Masky and Hoodie, I've got nothing to say, really. They're 2 other proxies to Slenderman, and that's about it. They're both just kind of there, in my opinion. They kill people. Whoop-de-doo. Clockwork just kind of feels like someone wrote her character to help cope with bullying. Her story is overly dramatic and nonsensical, especially since sexual abuse is used as a plot device. Yes, sexual abuse is traumatic and will leave you permanently scarred. I know this from personal experience. But the way it's used in Clockwork's story is just insulting. Sensitive topics like rape should never be used as a plot device. Her design doesn't make a lot of sense to me either, and it kind of goes down the same way Jeff's did in his story. Like, I would understand it more if she was constantly seeing clocks in her mind's eye to fuel her murderous tendencies, but gouging out her eye and replacing it with a clock? Ain't that a bit much? Smiledog.jpeg. This was a creepypasta that I actually liked. The time I heard about this story was around the same time chain letter emails and Facebook messages were going viral. They were like a disease. I hated it. I hated those times so much. And Smiledog Jpeg definitely had me doing a double take on the titles to any emails that I got at the time. It's a good, chilling story that anyone that's gotten a chain letter message can possibly relate to. Been drowned. Okay, I gotta be real here. I've never read or listened to a narration of Been Drowned. Mostly because video games are not my forte. I play dating sims on my phone, and that's about it. I've never played Legend of Zelda, so forgive me for not taking an interest in a creepypasta with a demonic version of Link whenever it appears. I have a general idea about what the creepypasta is about, but again, it's just not my thing. Sally! Alright, I know what I just said about sexual abuse being used as a plot device, but Sally's story actually handles it in a slightly better and slightly more realistic manner that I can empathize with. And I can definitely understand why Sally would become a vengeful spirit after all the terrible things that happened to her. Her story would make a little bit more sense to me if she became a spirit that just tormented her uncle for the rest of his life, and do similar things to predators and wrongdoers like him. The last creepypasta character I'll be talking about just so happens to be the only creepypasta to ever make me lose sleep and give me nightmares. The Rake. I distinctly remember that of all the characters in the creepypasta fandom, the Rake was one that was making all of us hardcore question if it was actually real. What makes the Rake so terrifying is everything. It's everything. It looks absolutely horrendous, and it has these massive, disgusting-looking claws that could slice your body in half if it wants to. And you don't know how long it's going to keep stalking and tormenting you before it finally decides to kill you. And from what I know, there's no way to lock it out of your home or ward it off. You're entirely helpless. So I feel like The Rake and its story are going to be one of the many OG creepypastas that will never truly die. Speaking of, has anyone else heard of Jason the Toymaker? I remember a couple of years ago, back when he was the new kid on the block in the creepypasta community, and he looks like the bastardized love child of Laughing Jack and Pennywise the Clown. He reminds me of Drossel Kynes from Black Butler for some reason, and I freaking love him and his story. If there was any creepypasta character that I could just absolutely geek out over forever, like a crazed fangirl, it would be Jason the Toymaker. So if you haven't heard of him or his story, go check him out. My name is Blue Raven 666. I have been plunged back into 2015, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.